Architecture is really the contribution that we make to the physical form of the built environment. But it's also beyond that. It's a discipline which has a very strong tradition and history, but also hopefully a very strong future. Therefore, I think this interrelationship between the discipline of the past and what is to come in the future, and how this knowledge is really understood to contribute to the formation of the built environment, is one of the exciting issues or possibilities about architecture. I think the role of the architect is in some ways twofold. It is to engage with society, to imagine ways in which architecture could have a consequence in terms of transforming society for the better. So the whole idea of a mode of betterment, of improvement, enhancement, which then goes hand in hand with concepts that are more linked to aesthetics, beauty, is one of the key roles that architects can play. But this is something that is not simply also assumed to be rooted in a fixed body of knowledge. Therefore, the attainment of new forms of knowledge and the interrelationship between these new forms of knowledge and new modes of engaging with society is one of the challenges that architects face. It's both a singular discipline, but at the same time it needs to be a collaborative discipline. It's at once focusing on disciplinary knowledge, but at the same time transdisciplinary practices. Therefore, it means that architectural education has to find new venues for collaboration, because today the knowledge that is needed for us to really address big picture issues globally are not solely available within the history and traditions of architecture. Therefore, we need to also find ways in which we are collaborating with other disciplines, not only the allied design disciplines, but really with a whole host of other disciplines, from law to politics to engineering, which then provide a much wider menu, if you like, of forms of knowledge, but also with them forms of collaboration that are necessary today to address the critical issues that we face today as a society. I think the GSD is very well positioned to address key societal issues today, because first, we are a multidisciplinary school in the sense that we believe strongly both in the focus of individual disciplines like architecture, but also on the interrelationship between architecture, landscape architecture, urban planning, urban design, and at the same time being placed within the context of a leading research university. We are very cognizant of the incredible possibilities that exist. Is really the way in which we as an institution are placing a lot of emphasis on research and research through design, so that we actually are trying to create new forms of design practice that are much more collaborative, that transcend individual faculty research. And that also helps position the school in a different way, so that we can really take on critical issues, address them as part of our research initiatives, and then link these research initiatives to our pedagogic programs, therefore to link research with pedagogy, which is also something which is really critical and necessary today if we're going to be able to have the new forms of knowledge that is necessary for addressing new challenges that are facing the built environment. I think at the GSD we've tried to, if you like, do both by addressing and understanding contemporary issues by being on site. We have a lot of studios that travel to different parts of the world. Every semester, more than half of our studios are in different locations. Over the last few years, we have been in 42 countries. So that means that we want to be, if you like, at the coalface by knowing what is happening in those localities, and we bring that knowledge back to the school. It's not really just simply about the school having an ideology or a style and then exporting that, but really to have multiple ways of understanding what is happening in those locations, and then that form of knowledge then comes back to the school, and we benefit from our collaborations. At the same time, I think it's very important that we don't become simply pragmatic problem solvers, and we lose, in a sense, a certain set of experiments, of forms of imagination that don't always have reality as the solution. In other words, you can also become too pragmatic by simply seeing your task as one that is solving some current problem. Having that kind of capacity of being in multiple places, multiple locations, is one of the key components of what the kind of mode of thought, a way of thinking, way of imagining that we need today to be able to actually create alternative strategies that really avoid the pitfalls of then training students or graduates who then, when they enter society, feel unable. So one key feature of many of our studios is actually that kind of participation is happening with society, with authorities, is happening while people are actually in the school. Ecological urbanism is, in a way, on one level, is a kind of mode of thinking. It's also trying to be the provision of certain modes of or methodologies of practice, which is trying to bring many of these disparate issues today to say that as designers, we face the challenge to imagine new modes of urbanization that are taking into consideration the limitations of resources. At the same time, it's cognizant of the incredible inequities and risks that also exist in society. So what are the ways in which we can imagine these new social, political, and spatial structures that respond to the dynamics of the multiplicity of these conditions that we face? Therefore, ecological urbanism is really both a kind of aesthetic and an ethical mode of practice, but it's also trying to find new modes of knowledge, new types of understanding that we also, as designers, as architects, as urbanists, become more empowered in a way to address critical societal issues. Well, in order for both the GSD but also for the ideas behind ecological urbanism to be effective, we need to communicate with others, to understand the contribution of others, to see this as, in a way, a participatory practice, because it needs to be, it's not like it's a fixed body of knowledge, it's an evolving body of knowledge, so we need to learn. And part of that process is really the process of dissemination, of communication. And therefore, from the book originally, we also had an ebook. We also have an ecological urbanism app, so that actually people can add projects to the app, and then this becomes also a useful design tool. And then, of course, now we have Spanish and Portuguese editions that have been published by Gustavo Guidi. It's also very important that, in fact, professors who are at the local universities will also be giving lectures in relation to some of the themes and topics of the book. Therefore, the issue of dissemination of this kind of knowledge, it doesn't mean also that we all have to agree about all the things. We're also here to learn from people who might disagree, who might be critical of some things, and so on and so forth, and then see what are the consequences of this, because we, of course, have gone on to do other things after ecological urbanism. And I think there is something which is extraordinarily beneficial when we have the capacity to learn from other colleagues in different parts of the world. But it's also very exciting to have the Spanish edition and see what reactions there are to it and how many mistakes we have in the translation or not. I hear good things, so that's also an exciting thing when you have this kind of new venture.